The hours flicked by within a matter of seconds. No one had entered or left the building since Maud had departed. Things shifted as Baxter tended to his tasks, but eventually that stopped too, and the building became still. A letter had been placed onto the desk, and the bottles which once sat perfectly were now crooked and scattered carelessly around the surfaces. Time slowed as Cassandra wandered over to the desk and read the words written on the paper. Baxter, I regret to inform you that your father has succumbed to the illness. I did everything in my power to keep him comfortable in his final days. He wasn't alone in his dying moments. The church was with him until the very end. As a result of this unfortunate tragedy, I will require the last of your remaining samples to protect the members of the church. It was signed by someone named Thomas Claring. Could that have been the man Baxter mentioned? His father's right-hand man. She was brought back from her thoughts by the sound of the door swinging open, and the familiar voice of Maud chiming through the hall.
Baxter?
The door closed softly behind her as she made her way through the rooms.
Maud, my dear,
he said softly from beyond the room where Cassandra was standing. I saw there was no one outside. Have you already finished treatments? Finally catching sight of him, Maud instantly realised that something was wrong. His once warm smile had vanished and was replaced with a look of despair. Baxter, what's wrong?
He's dead. My father. He's gone.
Maud's words were lost as she saw the dismay on his face. He had been there for her after the loss of her parents. It was only right that she was there for him this time. She slowly reached up and touched the side of his face. He leaned into her gentle touch as he gripped her other hand, entwining his fingers with hers.
I'm ending treatments for everyone. Everyone except you. You're all I have left.
She removed her hand from his face and looked up at him, shaking her head dismissively. Baxter, you can't do that. People need you. Tears began to form in his eyes. Clearly he wasn't expecting the answer she gave him.
The quicker those people die, the quicker this whole illness would die out. I've done my part. I gave them extra time. I want my time back. Time I can spend with you. Time I can spend trying to cure you completely, Maud.
Cassandra watched as Baxter's head turned to look at the bottles on his desk, then back to Maud, increasing his grip on her hand, using his other hand to pull her closer. What are you doing? She whispered. His fingertips travelled up her back and tangled in amongst her hair, as he leaned forward, catching her lips in a long overdue kiss. Maud tensed. She knew what this tender moment would mean. As much as she craved it, she tried to push him away, but she knew he wasn't going to let her go, and in the end she gave in to the temptation, passing on the illness in the process. Everything in the room paused at that moment. It was silent and still for a few seconds, until the sound of singing faded in, perfectly harmonised singing, echoing around Cassandra's head. She turned her body, feeling a cool breeze drift by her, as the room she was in vanished, leaving her in what appeared to be a church. Reaching out for one of the pews, she realised she was still unable to touch anything. She was still living through what appeared to be Maud's memories. There wasn't a soul around, but the synchronised notes of the many voices rung throughout the building. She assumed they were just voices that Maud remembered, voices from the past. She wandered across the empty room, until she reached a flight of stone steps leading up onto the second floor of the building. Knowing there must have been a reason she had been placed here, she wasted no time. As she approached the top of the steps, she heard voices. She peered around the corner. Although she couldn't be seen or heard, her instincts still insisted she remained cautious. A tall man dressed in robes stood in the centre of the room, his arms outstretched as if he was preaching.
I know what you've been doing, my child. Your heart is filled with so much hatred, but you
the man said, his voice vibrating around the empty space.
If anyone needs saving, it's you. You've murdered innocent people.
Maud suddenly stepped out from behind a wooden pillar, which seemed to be holding up the crippling roof of the ancient building. The man was calm, still maintaining his offers of forgiveness.
My heart breaks for you, my dear. I am so sorry about your family. May their souls rest in tranquility.
Maud's lip trembled at the man's words. Cassandra wasn't sure if it was sadness or anger, but whatever it was, it silenced Maud completely. The man slowly strolled over to her, appearing to offer comfort with open arms.
Come to me, my child,
he said, pulling her into a gentle embrace as she sobbed against his chest, soaking his robes with her tears. Lifting his hand, he ran his fingers through her auburn hair, as he continued his words of what she expected to be condolence, but quickly turned to poison.
I was under orders. The lower class holding out their hands, expecting all the world had to offer, nothing but filth in the cobbles.
Maud's emotions froze as she tried to tilt her head to look up at him, his heavy hands keeping her face pressed against him.
You belong with that class. You'll be reunited with your family soon, my child.
Just before she managed to pull herself away from his grasp, a knife was plunged into her neck repeatedly as she cried out in indescribable pain. On the fifth lunge of the blade, it became lodged in her collarbone, allowing her to finally escape his clutches. All Cassandra could do was watch. She knew she had no effect on the memories, and that she couldn't save her. She watched as her distant aunt crawled her way across the room to the stairs leading to the lower floor, followed closely by the seemingly holy man, who reached down to retrieve his blade from Maud's neck, before sending her hurtling down the steps to the cold stone ground below. She lay shaking on the floor, her face bruised from the impact. The man looked down at her, shaking his head in disgust, before heading down after her to finish the job. Cassandra had no idea what suddenly snapped within Maud's mind, but as she locked eyes with the man, she unbelievably scampered to her feet, fighting through the pain as she headed for the door of the church. Cassandra already knew what became of Maud after that moment, but she could never have imagined what came before her tragic ending, and how determined she was to survive long enough to see Baxter one last time.